This is a Federalism for Bioethics by Leslie Francis and John Francis in the Cambridge Quarterly of Healthcare Ethics. And as always, feel free to ask questions along the way, and we get to rate it at the end. So if you're around at the end, we get a little rating system up, and you get to rate it, and it'll be put up on a website. Ivan says, Phil Collins, Susudo, and Hand in Hand have great brass bits. Okay. I don't know things, but yeah. Phil Collins is cool. All right, here we go. The United States Supreme Court Dobbs decision in 2022 withdrew protections for rights to reproductive choice that had been granted federal constitutional protection for nearly 50 years. In the wake of Dobbs, the United States is in the throes of Federalist controversy. Mahler's Second Symphony. Cool. Some states are rushing to outdo each other in the stringency of their abortion restrictions, whereas others are strengthening protections for the procedure. 20 states have now enacted statutes prohibiting forms of gender-affirming care. Other states are erecting what they will hope prove to be effective protections for providers and patients they serve. The speculation of Justice Alito's majority opinion that Dobbs would put the abortion controversy to rest has proved unfounded. Instead, many legal issues remain unsettled. These range from whether states may prohibit advertising of abortions available elsewhere, prohibit shipments of medications for abortions into the state, or restrict travel outside their boundaries for abortions, to whether states may execute search warrants, create damage remedies, or impose criminal penalties for actions taking place beyond their territory. Writings in bioethics do not, for the most part, address federalist political structures or the problems they may raise for bioethics. What discussions there have been occurred This is a weird sense. What discussions there have been occurred well before Dobbs was anticipated and celebrated the possibility that experimentation and difference that federalism presents. Ivan says, Bill Connolly defines an intellectual as someone who can listen to the William Tell Overture and not think of the Lone Ranger. Well, it's easy. I'm too young for the Lone Ranger, so. But yes. I mean, can you think of Where Is My Mind without thinking of Fight Club? Very hard. I can almost never separate the two out. Like, where is my mind? I don't know. Fight Club. Okay, clearly the situation in the United States has changed in one important way, the decision in Dobbs. You haven't seen Fight Club yet. You know, you have to remember, it's a 1999 movie. It's it was made in a different time and place than we exist in now. That was 4 years ago. Like, holy shit. Yeah. And it's the end credits, so yeah, like, and the movie's a trip. If you don't realize what there's a big reveal at a certain point, and so the whole thing it's messing with your head, and then they play this song, and it's very iconic. So that's what happens. I remember telling someone like a few years after they were having like a re-showing of it. So a guy I know was going to see it for the first time, this was like maybe a few years after it came out, and he was like, "Well, what should I expect?" I said, just pay attention. Like, there's a lot going on in the movie. It's actually kind of complicated because it's off a book, so they had to get a lot in, and so it's a complicated movie in some sense. And then yeah, I've actually considered using clips from that as alerts for different things here. I almost did, but whatever. I'm sticking with my Conan clips for the most part. I like my Conan clips. It's like, where's my follow? What? Do I have my follow here? Yeah, for the Engamondo.
I salute you.
There we go. Isn't that nice? I salute you. So yeah, hey DCI, what's going on? You don't think of Fight Club, Where's Your Mind? Yeah. Well, I used to sit through the credits when I was younger. Anyway. Okay, so yeah, when the U.S. government took away the federal protections on abortion, a lot of stuff changed. Okay, but less clear is whether this change is sufficient to throw into question the desirability of federalist political structures for bioethics. In a nation in which rights cannot be universally guaranteed, some states may remain havens for protections while others refuse to grant rights recognition, but this is at best a half loaf in which rights recognition is uneven within a single country. You just make me not an intellectual. Hey, Lumpy, what's going on? For bioethics, the problems thus generated may be significant. Some may have protected rights to forms of care that are critical to their well-being, whereas others may not receive these protections. This exploratory article argues that the problems with federalism for bioethics may range beyond the immediate stark differences emerging after Dobbs and reach to difficulties with justifications for federalism as an institutional structure. We begin by describing Federalist institutional theory, briefly calling attention to several features of the U.S. federal system that may be unique. Yeah. This is like too many words here. We then present more standard arguments for federalism that allows for cultural differences to remain within a structure that provides for the advantages of common security and commerce, that it provides a laboratory for confined experiments, and that it is government closer to the people and thus more informed about local needs and preferences, and that it creates layers of government that can constrain one another and thus provide double protection for the rights of citizens. We should emphasize that our discussion is primarily about federalism's manifestation in the United States, as non-ideal theorists, that is, as theorists who think about issues of justice in a non-ideal world. We recognize that our claims may be limited to this context. Nonetheless, we hope they prove informative for thinking about federal systems more generally. Okay, so what these people are doing is they're showing that bioethics and federalism in terms of like government, because this healthcare ethics journal, sort of don't match up at times. Hey, hydrocannabinoid, what's going on? Thinking of bioethics just brings to mind the gain of function research as a subject. Yeah, yeah, it's a huge area. I should get some shout outs going here. We also have Ann chat. Give Ann a shout out. Ann is a streamer here on Twitch and other places, and talks politics and sociology and things like that, while playing games and doing, arts and craftsy things. So give Ann a follow, friend of the stream. We also have Lumpy. We'll give him a shout out in a minute too. Lumpy is a Minecraft player. He makes fantasy worlds, but he's also a chemist. Yeah, can talk politics, chemistry, and finance and all sorts of things there. Yep. Unreal says, seems pretty straightforward that there aren't different bioethics in Michigan and New York. Yeah, but that's the question is, how are we, like, if we don't have different bioethics in different parts of the country, but we do have different forms of government allowed to have different rules, then how do you make it work? We don't know. And that's what they're just talking about. They said that this is going to be exploratory. So it's not really going to come up with any big answers, but what they're going to do is they're going to say, look, these things work and like those things might not, and we have to look into this. All right, federalism in the United States. Federalism is a political structure under which subnational units have independent, constitutionally recognized political authority. This constitutional recognition for subnational units is the critical difference between a federal system and a devolutionary system. Under the latter, subnational units hold their political authority by grant from the national government. Such grants of authority may be long-standing but remain subject to limitation or even reversal should the national government so desire. Unreal Brian says, if the assumption that law should reflect ethics, a big but not unreasonable assumption, then law should converge on the ethics. There, you solved it. Yeah, but again, people are going to disagree what the ethics is. So you're going to have the people that say all abortion is wrong over here, and then you're going to have all the people that say no, the right to choose is more important, like autonomy over there, and then you're going to have two different ethics because we don't know exactly what the ethics should be. I don't know what a devolutionary system is, but they're saying that I think what they just said here in the last sentence was that the federal government can take away like the states' rights. Like it's only been granted provisional rights, like the subnational units. The states' rights can be their ability to rule can be taken away by the national government. And you can't do that in the United States. Like we have like states' rights here, where it's like this is our area, our laws take authority over. The federal government can't come in and be like, no, your laws are wrong. I mean, there's things that supersede, but they can't take away your right to govern. Yeah. We are not devolutionary. No. So that's what it seems to be here. So yeah, such grants of authority may be long-standing but remain subject to limitation or even reversal should the national government so desire. Yeah, in the United States, the national government cannot take away states' right to govern. Devolutionary means that power evolves back to the subunit rather than... Okay, so that the power is always going back to the federal government. Yeah, like in the U.S., it does not just go to the federal government. The states have the absolute right to rule in their area. Okay. So with thus independently grounded recognition, the levels of government in a federal system are supposed to serve as checks on one another. In the description of the Federalist Papers, U.S. federalism is a compound republic doubly protective of rights. How the division of powers works in practice in federal systems varies immensely across the globe. What all federal systems share is the constitutional recognition for that division. Yeah, so you've got the federal government and then you've got the state governments, and they're supposed to you have different layers of rights, and then the two have to work it out. So it's like sort of a checks and balances thing. And how you doing, Cinesemiotics? O'Brien says, the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, the powers that delegate to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Yeah, so instead of going to the government, it goes down to the states or the people. Ivan says, in the UK, devolution referred to giving the Scottish, Welsh, or Northern Irish governments more power control. Yeah, so I guess that's from the British centralized government. Then, I guess the crown or whatever, then you are granting them provisional ruling powers over their areas. But it would, I guess, go back to the crown if they so chose. That makes sense. All right. The United States is judged to be the longest-standing federal system in continuous operation today. Its basic constitutional framework was laid out almost 250 years ago in a world far different, not least with respect to the understanding of health and what healthcare could achieve. At the time, states were zealously protective of their status, and in many cases of the institution of slavery they supported. The Constitution thus baked in protections for states. Most importantly, the Constitution assured equal representation for the state in the Senate, regardless of population, and replicated this equality to some extent in the allocation of votes for president in the Electoral College. The Constitution also provided that no state may, without its consent, be deprived of equal representation of the Senate. The result is that the four states with the largest population combined, they represent just under a third of the U.S. population, have only 8% of the representation in the U.S. Senate. At the time the Constitution was adopted, some states were significantly smaller than others by a factor about 1 to 12, but today the difference is far larger. The ratio of the population of California to the population of Wyoming is 670 to 1. Yeah, this is one of the things. You've got states where you've got a handful of people, and their decision for that handful of people is affecting tens of millions of other people. And it's is that a good idea? And many people in this country are like, no, it's not a good idea that, a few people out in Wyoming would get to decide for the millions of Californian people what the right course of action is. And it's well, is that smart? Probably not anymore. Changing the U.S. Constitution by amendment is onerous, moreover. Of the more than 10,000 amendments that have been proposed, only 27 have been successful, the last in 1992, restricting the effective changes in compensation for senators and representatives until after a further election. The Equal Rights Amendment, proposed to guarantee equality of law regardless of sex, has languished unapproved for decades. Amendments may be proposed either by two-thirds majority of both houses of Congress or by the application of the legislatures of two-thirds of the states for a convention. Yeah, so you have to get almost all of the Senate and the House, or you have to get two-thirds of all the states, which is really hard to do. Amendments must then be ratified by the legislatures or by conventions in 3/4 of the states. You need 3/4 of all the states. It's just crazy. The result of these supermajoritarian provisions is that smaller states are effectively able to stop the amendment process with comparative ease. Historian Jill Lepore characterizes the Constitution of today as brittle. She is engaged in a project to analyze why amendments have become even more difficult in the past 50 years. Unreal Brown would like to propose an amendment that Congress critters don't get paid during government shutdowns. Just saying. Yeah, but those people are rich anyway. They're not making money off the federal government. They're making money off other things. So it's like they're the ones who made the rules. There already no ways around them. Like that's always the problem. It's the yeah, they're not the ones getting harmed. They've got plenty of money. It's the everyday people that rely on the U.S. government to not be broken that get screwed over during difficult periods. All right, so Gil Laporte argues that the current era of party polarization, not imagined by the drafters of the Constitution, has played a major role in the United States being the country with one of the lowest rates of constitutional amendment in the world. Yeah, like at the moment, almost nothing gets done in the U.S. The people in power just want it that way, it looks like, and they're perfectly happy to do whatever it takes to just, keep the status quo. I'm not a political person. I don't know history. Like, you have to go check out Shane McInnes for that sort of stuff. But, yeah, it's just looking like the people in power are more than happy to just not do anything at this point. Unreal Brian says, whereas people like Thomas Jefferson said we should start from scratch every 20 years or so. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. They knew back in the day that this is what happens. Once you've got entrenched powers that be, they don't want to lose their power, and that's what happens. So once something gets enough, institutional power in a society, it gets very hard to, make change because the people in power like having power. I mean, everyone would know, like, if you have money and power, it's like, why give it up? It's like, don't. And then things get, and then as time goes on, more and more stuff starts breaking. You have to do more and more stupid things to maintain your power. And then eventually revolution comes. So that's how it goes. Frank says political parties that have significant influence across the branches of government render ludicrous the idea of checks and balances. Yeah, so the joke isn't that it's checks and balances, it's that it's mutual legitimization. You're not really checking and balancing, you're just giving each other legitimization, and then at that point, it's all just bullshit. Political parties shouldn't be considered terrorist groups? I mean, maybe the major ones, yeah. Checks and bank balances, exactly. So yeah, it's just mutual legitimation at that point. They're just giving themselves, they're just, legitimizing themselves, but it's all, bullshit. Alright, so nevertheless, constitutional change in the United States does occur through decisions of the U.S. Supreme Court. That is how constitutional protection for contraception, abortion, and same-sex marriage became law. But it is also how constitutional protection for abortion crumbled in Dobbs, and how the rights of the same-sex couples to employ website creators for their weddings became limited by the First Amendment rights of these designers. Originalism, that's scare quotes originalism, the idea that legal texts should be interpreted in terms of what they meant at the time they were enacted, is the judicial philosophy dominant on the court today. Yeah, like, I find this the most crazy thing. Who the hell knows what they were thinking back in the day? It's very hard. Feminist legal scholar Viva Siegel has argued that this originalism locates constitutional authority in imagined communities of the past, entrenching norms, traditions, and modes of life associated with old status hierarchies. I mean, this is exactly how I kind of think of it. I mean, I'm not going to say it this well, but like, this is the idea. It's imagined, and then they're just, it's some fantasy land that these people have in their heads about what the other people meant, and there's no way to check that the fantasy of the way the lawyers have imagined the people in the past. There's no way to check whether that's accurate or not. So it's just whatever they want it to be, and it drives me. I find it very, very silly. Yeah, constitutional courts play major roles in many federal systems, but the difficulty of amendment places particular stress on the role of Supreme Court in the United States. Frank says original could work if Congress was quick to make new laws to replace those bad laws when they caused issues. Yeah, I mean, again, if things were moving faster, then it wouldn't be so much trouble to be like, no, that's a crazy old law, we have to get rid of that. But since they don't want it to change because, for whatever reason, they don't do it. All right. Federal systems grant different kinds of authority to subnational units and in different ways. The U.S. structure limits federal authority to enumerate powers. Of relevance to healthcare, the most important of these are the power to tax and spend, and the power to regulate interstate commerce. These powers are not unique to the federal government. However, states also may tax, spend for the general welfare, and regulate commerce so long as their actions do not discriminate against interstate commerce or engage in unwarranted protectionism. Moreover, states have the general police power, that is, the authority to regulate for the general welfare, including for public health. During the coronavirus disease, COVID-19 pandemic, states were at the forefront of implementing policies such as business closures, public event cancellations, mask mandates, and vaccine distribution. States went very different ways, with some, such as Florida, opening up to welcome vacationers, who then returned home spreading infection. On the other hand, although the courts were initially sympathetic to emergency measures, the U.S. Supreme Court stepped in within a few months to restrict states' abilities to enact public health measures that impacted the exercise of religion. Yeah. So, this is the thing. We've got these weird laws or the weird interpretations where, you have states can try to protect themselves, but then if you're not allowing the other state to have their commerce, then it doesn't matter. And that's what because this is the thing, you can't regulate interstate commerce. And if Florida says they need to have tourist dollars, then Florida is going to just be a super spreader state, which it kind of was. Oh well. Over the course of U.S. history, interrelationships between the federal government and the states over shared areas of authority have been understood in different ways. There are lots of records of the arguments any Congress considered, as well as lots of journalism and reasoning documented to the passage of laws. Yeah, that's how it is done today. But the idea that we're gonna go back to what the people hundreds of years ago are thinking, I don't think that's why is that a good idea? The Federalist Papers is often consulted for the thinking of the early founders. I agree. They have some idea, but and you're completely right to semiotics. The problem is, if you're applying the ideas from back then to the state of the world now, the state of the world now is very different from the state of the world hundreds of years ago. And so you're inherently fantasizing, you're making something up. It's a fantasy. What would they think about the internet now? They wrote it all down, dude. Yeah, I know they wrote it down. But the question is, what would the founders think about the internet? There was no internet. There was nothing like the internet. The idea that even if we knew what they were thinking about, the media of their day, that has nothing to do with the media of today. You think they have any idea what a streamer is? Why would someone from 200 years ago have any idea about live streaming? How would they regulate that? It makes this is why it's confusing to me that originalism is something. It's well, that doesn't even make a difference because they couldn't have been talking about what we have today. There are anti-federalist papers. That's fun. I didn't know about that on Real Brian. The internet is for porn. Exactly. So yeah. It determines what the law would need to change. Yeah, but that's the question. How would you? You'd need to change the law, but then you're interpreting it how? Because if the law doesn't appeal because it's from hundreds of years ago to the current contemporary situation, how are we supposed to if you're going with your originalism stuff? What are you then basing your originalism on? If that's the whole problem, is that they didn't originally think about these sorts of situations. Unreal says, but like I said before, these very founders thought our system needed to evolve over time, and what they put in place in the 1780s should not be set in stone. Exactly. And so this is the question. We've gotten too restrictive in our lawmaking now, so it's weird. No, and I agree with you, Cinesemiacs. A lot of stuff was written down, and that's how legal things are interpreted. You look at what people were saying and thinking when they were making these decisions, and that's really important for the legal profession. But originalism, I find very strange because it just seems inherently very confused. They could not have thought of everything back in the day. And so you're going back to old ideas that may or may not have anything to do with current situations. It's up to Congress to answer these questions. The courts are reluctant to get involved, believe it or not. No, I think you're 100% right there. The court is always like, this is not up to us to do. And so they leave, they say, hey, Congress, make a new law or whatever else. It's just, I'm not sure. I know that like the courts are usually like, we're not supposed to be the ones making the change. That's for like the elected officials. But the question is, how are they ruling then? Even then, if they're like, oh, we're not making the change, it's like, well, isn't that still deciding with the status quo? And that's my problem. It's like, well, who gets to decide what counts as like status quo and not status quo? And like, this is my like big question. Like, I don't understand exactly what gets to be the default. And the legal profession is very conservative in this way. They want to say, oh no, it's not up to us to make the change. Society makes the change. The politicians make the legal changes in the laws. And like, that's not up to the courts. The courts are just supposed to interpret it. But again, the interpretations are not innocent. And going back to like just saying it's originalist is not innocent. So yeah, I agree. It's like they don't want to do it, but that doesn't mean they aren't already making a having a stance. Yeah. So, over the course of U.S. history, interrelationships between the federal government and the states over shared areas of authorities have been understood in different ways. These have ranged from an insistence on separate roles and spheres reflecting these roles to cooperation in achieving joint goals. As healthcare has become increasingly sophisticated and critical to human well-being, the participation of government in providing health and providing care has become increasingly complex. In the United States, Medicare coverage for older adults who have paid into the Social Security system is fully federal. Medicaid coverage for people in poverty is a federal-state partnership. The Affordable Care Act offers states significant incentives to expand their Medicaid programs beyond the categorically needy, poor, aging, people blind and disabled or pregnant to cover everyone eligible below income and asset limitations. However, the U.S. Supreme Court held that the requirement that states expand to continue participation in the Medicaid program impermissibly coerced the states. As of 2023, 10 states, including 2 of the largest population-wise, Texas and Florida, had not expanded Medicaid. The result is significant variations in the proportion of population lacking health insurance, with Texas leading the way at 18% of the population uninsured. That's a huge number of people. In general, states that have not expanded Medicaid are among those most likely to have high rates of uninsurance, high rates of maternal and infant mortality, low rates of independent licensure for advanced practice nurses, and very restrictive abortion laws. 4 arguments for federalism have predominated: cultural difference with common security, a laboratory for confined experimentation, proximity to the people, and double protection for rights of citizens. And what follows, we argue that although these considerations might in the abstract support federalism, they fail in the context of contemporary U.S. federalism. Moreover, they fail in ways that suggest trouble for federalism more generally. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're looking at healthcare and saying this is going to be trouble for federalists. Cultural difference. Historically, and as always, like, feel free to keep coming with the comments. Me, personally, I'm not as good with the political theory. Like, I just don't know it. So, like, if you got comments, you want to, like, criticize me, go right ahead. Because a lot of times, like, this is not stuff I'm, like, as read up on. Cultural difference. Historically, a primary explanation for the emergence of federal systems was the desire of smaller units to band together to achieve advantages of greater security while preserving their differences. The United States of the 1780s arguably did feature recognized cultural differences. Some of the colonies had been founded by adherents of different religious faiths: Massachusetts by Puritans, Pennsylvania by Quakers, and Maryland by Catholics. Frank says, politically speaking, that shirt is way too yellow. Yes, it is. It's a very yellow shirt. But by far the most important cultural difference should not, under any circumstance, be a justification worthy of respect in support of subnational differences. The fact that slavery was a dominant economic institution in Georgia, Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. Parenthetically, although slavery existed in other colonies, it was the southern states that were insistent on constitutional protection for the institution. Cultural differences do remain among the U.S. states. Rates of religiosity vary significantly among states, as do percentage of evangelical Christians. However, U.S. states contain significant internal variation. Even in the most religious states, only about 50% of the populations are evangelicals. The opposition of conservative Christian groups to abortion or to gender-affirming healthcare has been very influential on state policies, but these policies are not reflective of the views of significant portions of state populations. Gerrymandering has diluted the voting power of minority populations by dividing them or crowding them into districts where they are overrepresented, and has exacerbated disparities between the population preferences and legislative enactments. Yeah, so this just made the news that, because this paper, just came out, but I don't know how fast turnaround this journal had. But, like, there's a state, I think it might have been Mississippi or Alabama, one of them down there, where, or was it Louisiana? I forget. But basically, every black majority county was put into, like, one voting district. And so the Supreme Court was like, you have to at least make two, because it was, like, a huge number of people in the state. But they basically separated it out. So, like, and then the state resubmitted another line map drawing, and it didn't fix the problem. And the court was just like, no. And so they're going to keep doing this because I guess they're just going to keep putting it off as long as they can. Unreal Brian says only one piece of evidence need be mooted that states are dumb. Michigan fought a war over hire over Toledo and lost. Yeah, that was a great, wasn't that a Shane stream? That was fantastic. So yeah, that was a fun stream. Like, yeah, who's fighting over, little things? Oh, man. Yeah, so, okay. Mississippi now prohibits abortions at all times except to save the mother's life or where pregnancy was caused by reported rape. This means that if a pregnant patient falls within the over a third of the Mississippi population who believe that abortion should be legal in most or all cases, as far as the state is concerned, they would be required to continue pregnancies that cause serious damage to their health, so long as the damage falls short of death, and even if the pregnancy is diagnosed at the earliest possible moment. It is hard to see how support for the religious views of some can justify such serious imposition on the well-being of others, especially when or pregnant patients would not experience the same fate elsewhere in the same country. Beyond accounting for minority views, cultural difference has other problems as a justification for federalism. One is the lack of alignment between cultural preservation and cultural difference. While there may be arguments for preserving endangered groups or languages, these arguments surely do not apply to cultural differences generally or to the majorities dominating in some U.S. states today. Another is the presence of irresolvable moral differences. For deep divides over bioethics, issues such as abortion or medical aid in dying, allowing one religious or cultural view to prevail as policy may reflect the imposition of one group's moral views on others, contrary to the assumption of political liberalism. In short, the cultural difference argument may be at least a partial historical explanation for the emergency of subnational units, but it does not follow that it is a justification for them. When rights cannot be achieved universally, federalism may be a partial justification, enabling protections for some, but it does not provide protection for all. Yeah, so basically, I guess what this argument is, it's saying, look, you were trying to break into smaller units so people can have different, rules that would govern them because that's how they want it for cultural differences. But basically what it's doing is making the biggest group in that area being able to bully everybody else. And so all the, you're like the biggest fish in your small pond. And then so really the smaller cultural groups are really being stamped out. So it's like you're providing some protections, but really for the biggest group in that area, not for the smaller groups. Even if like the biggest group there is not even like a majority, maybe all the smaller groups, but since they're the biggest voting block, it's you're protecting the biggest voting block in the state, which is not really what the goal of preserving cultural differences is. Okay. States as laboratories. Yeah, Unreal Brian says the better argument is the opportunity for smaller scale experimentation, the idea that states are laboratories of democracy. Okay, and I think that's what we're getting to now. So we're going to see what the author has to say about that. States as laboratories. I keep thinking of Labradors. Wouldn't it be cool if we had like dogs? Anyway. States as laboratories. A quintessential American justification for federalism is the laboratory of the states. This justification has been identified with Justice Louis Brandeis in dissenting from a decision holding that 14th Amendment due process was violated by a state requirement that ice sellers be licensed. The justification sees states as vehicles for natural experiments. Social policies may be tried out on a limited basis in a single state. If they succeed, they may be followed elsewhere. If they fail, the damages will be constrained. Louis Brandeis. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, it looks like these authors are, as far as I know, like, I don't know this stuff on top of their research. Again, what do I know about healthcare, ethics, or politics? Not a whole lot. Okay, even natural experiments are subject to ethical evaluation. However, natural experiments subject people to interventions that may be politically enacted but otherwise affect individuals without their consent and may do so in ways that cause them significant harm. One of us has argued that natural experiments should be subject to at least some limitations, including those related to evidence. Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to have political experimentation. It's another thing to experiment with someone's health. That's the sort of thing you have, review boards for. And so, like, I guess when you get healthcare, it's like this is going to cause trouble. Yeah. They should be constructed to minimize harmful effects that can be anticipated based on currently available evidence, and they should be evaluated as they unfold. I don't even know what this word is. The rescission of federal protection for the reproductive rights has opened the door to natural experiments regarding reproduction in the United States. These experiments should not be viewed as only occurring in the abortion restrictive states. Abortion protective states are also changing policies to solidify abortion rights or to try to protect people coming from other states for care. It will be possible to observe whether changes in access to abortion are correlated with changes in rates of pregnancy, miscarriage, maternal morbidity and mortality, infant morbidity and mortality, distribution of substantiated reports of child abuse, childhood poverty, women in the workforce, and many other social measures. It will thus be possible to see at least suggestive evidence of success or failure and to decide whether to change course because of the levels of harm that are occurring. Yeah, I mean, it's fair. We're going to just find out what happens. I mean, and you're playing with people's lives. Let's play with people's healthcare. That's a great idea. Terrible. The changes occurring in the United States today, however, fail to meet an idealized version of the laboratory of the states. Instead of policy changes in one or a few states that can be observed and evaluated, what is occurring is a rush to enact highly restrictive laws. Within a year after Dobbs, only over half of the states had enacted these laws, although some were still on hold due to court decisions. These laws were not passed after consideration of evidence about their possible impacts on health or health care. For example, Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves, in signing both abortion prohibitions and bills about adoption and foster care, has consistently made statements such as, quote, "Mississippi will always protect life. Our state will continue to be a beacon on the hill, a symbol of hope for the country and a model for the nation. Mississippi will be relentless in its commitment to life." End quote. Indeed, state laws have been criticized for not being clear and for using language such as medical emergency or irreversible damage that may be difficult for healthcare providers to interpret. Some states have already made clarificatory changes in their laws, but others have not as of yet. These battles are ongoing and resolutions cannot be expected soon. I mean, yeah, I know not everyone here is from the United States, but like we have a lot of, like, you hear about these things where people are leaving states, like medical professionals are just leaving states because the sort of care they provide, like say you have some specialized nurses in like, you know, a maternity nurse. And so some of the things that they provide, like part of their job would be just like their regular part of their job would, you know, touch on some of this stuff. So they were just leaving states. And so a maternity hospital like straight up closed in one of the states because they didn't have any nurses anymore. Everyone was too afraid because they couldn't tell whether their normal standard of care would fall under, like, you know, illegal anymore. And it's like, all right, what did you think was gonna happen, state, when you made this ambiguous law? Yeah. Unreal Brian says, same happening in education, teachers leaving Florida to get away from the insanity. Yeah, so people don't like uncertainty in their life. It's very, very stressful to, you know, be poor and not have money or be under threat from the government. This is one of these things, why we have the First Amendment here. You have the right to free speech from the government coming after you. That's the whole point, is that you're allowed to not be afraid of the government in this area. Like, because you don't want to have to be always worried about what you're going to say. And, you know, you go to other countries, you see, like, the old joke was in Russia, like, someone was holding up blank protest signs and they got arrested. And they said, look, I didn't even say anything, like, bad against anyone. And they said, yeah, but we know what your protest signs were going to say. It's like, these old jokes about, when you can't even say anything as the government, you're afraid of things. It's like you can't, like, it makes for an uncomfortable life. And so it's like now people are just leaving. So yeah. Okay. Author says, to the best of our knowledge, moreover, it is questionable whether efforts to evaluate these experiments are occurring in any systematic way by either the states conducting them or the federal government. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, conducts an abortion surveillance system, but reporting by states is voluntary. It is one of the things. The people who are doing these things don't want the data out there either, because I'm sure they know things are going to look ugly. And that's not necessarily because they are bad, but any change always makes it look bad. And so I'm sure they know that. They're not like complete idiots. They know that anytime you make one of these big changes, you're going to break a few eggs, and they don't want that to come out. Even if, like, eventually it does, like, get better than, like, it's not like worst case scenario, things are okay. There's still going to be bad things that happen. And it's like, you can also, in the United States, if you try to find, research on, like, police misconduct and things like that, it's all self-reported, and quite often it's not compiled anywhere. It's because you want to know why people don't want that data out there. It's going to look bad. It's just what it is. Okay, data may not be available either, as both providers and patients realistically fear reprisals if abortion care becomes known. Medication abortion is now the method used in the majority of early abortions in the United States, and the company Aid Access reports a sharp increase in the daily rate of requests for medication abortion. Self-managed abortions are unlikely to be included in reported data unless complications occur. Some private organizations are seeking to collect data about abortion rates, such as the Society for Family Planning, but these efforts rely on voluntary participation, so also may not be comprehensive. Yeah, so this is the thing. Like, they were going to allow you to buy drugs from out-of-state pharmacies that would sell you, like, abortion drugs. And then, like, I think they put a stop to that, like, something. So it's like, even then, but like the question is, at the federal level, why can't we sell drugs through the mail? Why not? Like there's no problem buying something in a different state and then using the federal, the mail service to send it. That's nothing to do with, your local state. So they're trying hard, but like, it's all very strange. Okay, so yeah, so I guess the conclusion for this one was that the states as laboratories, no one's actually treating it like a laboratory. This is more just like haphazard. And so the idea that like you're actually, trying something new here, no one's trying anything. They're just like going full blown at it and, see what comes what may. And so it's not really, if anyone is actually attempting to do the laboratory thing, that's not what's happening right now, and not with healthcare. Okie doke. States as proximate to the people. A further argument for federalism is that it places government closer to the people and thus may be more reflective of local circumstances, needs, and preferences. We have already noted that states are not uniform and that the situations of substantial minorities within states may not be reflected by state-level policies. In this section, we discuss a further feature of how U.S. federalism at least that raises questions for the proximity argument. Constitutional protection extends only to the level of the state. Under U.S. federalism, states are constitutionally recognized, but governmental units within them have no comparable recognition. It is up to individual states whether to allow any internal variation or to devolve authority to counties, cities, or other sub-state levels of government. In many states, within-state variations, particularly between cities and rural areas, have become pronounced. From Nashville to San Antonio, cities have enacted ordinances protecting rights that are rejected at the state level. State legislatures have responded by removing authority from these sub-state units. For example, in Texas, cities may no longer enact regulations regarding matters ranging from employment to clean water. State legislatures have, in addition, passed laws making it more difficult for urban residents to vote. In Georgia, for example, voting districts can have no more than one drop box per 100,000 voters. States have formed voting districts that divide urban areas and thus make it more difficult for residents to elect representatives that align with their preferences. States have even ejected representatives from the legislature for expressing unpopular views. Yeah, so this is the gerrymandering of everything in the U.S. has gotten a little bit ridiculous. And so the idea that like the government actually represents the people is at the state level very, very fucked up in some places. So yeah, it's just ridiculous. Okay. States as rights protectors. In the United States, the Bill of Rights originally applied only to the federal government. It took the Civil War to create guarantees of due process and equal protection that applied to the states, and it has taken well over a century to interpret these clauses to incorporate Bill of Rights guarantees in ways that make them applicable to the states. Roe v. Wade was based on such incorporationist reasoning, holding that the rights to privacy should be applied to states through the 14th Amendment. Under U.S. federalism, states may themselves be sources of constitutional rights, so long as these are consistent with the federal Constitution. After Dobbs, some state courts have interpreted their constitutions to protect abortion rights. Other states have rejected state law theories as protective of abortion rights. Some cases were still pending in state courts as of July 2023. Okay, so this was basically from like the summer when they finished up this paper. Interesting. Many state Supreme Courts are elected, however, and the fate of abortion rights in these states may hinge on partisan election results. In 2022, Republicans took a majority on the state Supreme Court in North Carolina, whereas in 2023, the abortion supporter Janet Protasewicz won a seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Yeah, like the Wisconsin, it's interesting what's going on up there. Apparently, a lot of stuff's getting put through now that they have like one more, just the one vote made a big deal. State constitutions also may be amended through public voting process. In Kansas, voters supported an earlier state Supreme Court decision protecting reproductive rights. Anticipating such grassroots efforts, however, other states are pursuing measures to increase the threshold for their passage. Yeah, this was crazy. They thought in Kansas, oh yeah, we're just going to put on the ballot box and it'll just pass. And then all the people in Kansas were like, no, we like abortion. And it was then they realized they can't do that because the majority of people actually did like having the healthcare available. Without federal intervention, therefore, states may vary in the extent to which they protect rights. The U.S. Supreme Court in Dobbs declined protections for reproductive liberty rights. The U.S. Congress also appears unlikely to act. Abortion thus illustrates a policy area in which neither a state nor the federal government appears inclined to offer protection. Access to healthcare is another illustrative area. Apart from prisoners, people in the United States do not have a federal constitutional right to health care, and as described above, the U.S. Supreme Court has held that the federal government cannot impose a statutory right through the Medicaid program as currently constructed. One recent commentary has cast doubt, moreover, on whether the decision holding that it is cruel and unusual punishment to fail to provide incarcerated people with minimal health care can withstand the originalist jurisprudence of this current Supreme Court. Yes, I mean, if you get arrested and you're in jail, you may get better medical coverage than being not in jail in the United States. And so it's a little bit ridiculous. Oh, there was just something today I saw. There was a guy who was disabled and he wants to stay in jail even though they want to put him on parole, because if he gets out of jail, he won't be able to afford his health care and he will be in much worse shape out of jail than in jail. Like in jail, he gets taken care of. Once he gets out of jail, then basically he's going to be in a lot of like physical trouble because he's now like disabled in some way. So it's like, you can like look this news up. It was like, you know, an interesting story in the last week or whatever. Okay, to be sure, the United States is beset by controversy over whether the rights in question should be given constitutional support. Our only point is that if what justifies federalism is that it will result in improved rights protection, the justification does not hold in the case of these healthcare rights. Federalism at best carves out space for states to act on their own, and of course may not even do this if the national government acts to constrain states' actions. Indeed, this court has interpreted the federal constitution to impose some such constraints, for example, holding that it violates the First Amendment to require anti-abortion pregnancy sites to inform prospective patients about other services that may be available to them, or restricting states' ability to limit religious gatherings in the pandemic. Nationwide legislation is also possible that the states cannot constitutionally restrict if it falls within an enumerated federal power. The Republican National Committee has stated its committed opposition to abortion and urged Republican lawmakers in state legislatures and in Congress to pass the strongest pro-life legislation possible. The federal spending power is available to further such legislation. For example, constraints could be imposed on any providers taking Medicare or Medicaid. While such federal level legislation is unlikely to pass, many Republican leaders disfavor such action. Nonetheless, its possibility does exist as a reminder of the limits of states as rights protectors in the U.S. federal system. Yeah, so that's the thing. You have the right to like die here in the US, like just get yourself killed by shitty healthcare. And it's like, well, what is the right that's being protected? If the federal government says you should have more rights and then the states say you don't have those rights, who's actually protecting them? So that's the hard part. Like you have the right to other things. And this is one of the things that gets me in this country. Like people say that you're protecting your autonomy and these big ideas, but when it comes down to it, you're losing your right to healthcare, but you're gaining some sort of abstract thing that doesn't amount for anything. And so that's kind of one of the weird things. Like, oh no, we're protecting your rights, but in the abstract. But again, these authors said they're not talking about abstractions. They're doing non-ideal theory. They're saying, well, what is your right on the ground? And when you're talking about on the ground, you need healthcare sometimes. Then that abstract, like sort of property that you had, that the conservatives want, like, oh no, you have autonomy or whatever that is. Well, that's not actually, doesn't amount to anything. The thing that amounts to it is actual, medical care. All right, conclusion. By assigning constitutionally protected authority to subnational units, federalism presents the possibility for significant variation in the well-being of people who live in these various units. In this commentary, we have explored whether justifications for federalism can support these differences, at least as they exist in the United States today. We've argued that these justifications are seriously problematic. Injustices among subnational units cannot be justified by federalism. In the contemporary United States, some of the most significant injustices concern health and access to health care. Federalism does present the possibility of some states protecting rights that others do not. Assuming that movement among states is protected, an assumption asserted only by Justice Kavanaugh and Dobbs, those who are fortunate enough to be able to travel will be able to access rights they cannot access at home. Nonetheless, movement may not be readily available to minors, people without documentation, people with disabilities, people who lack economic resources, or people who have responsibilities that preclude travel. Only rights protected at the federal level will suffice in such cases. Okay, so this was a nice little article. Quite often when I read stuff like that or so far I'm out of my area, I'm just like, okay, sounds good to me. And I don't have any criticisms. But yeah. So basically, now we get to put our little review down. If anyone wants to review, please do. You can do it using the emotes there. They're better TTV emotes, so everyone has access to them. Basically, it's the stuff all the way on the right, not like the name right here, but all the way over. Yeah, it's to the right. So you type that in and get to a review. So if you think this had fun ideas and makes your brain dance, you type the brain dance in. And for thank you, CineSemiX, for the vote. Got the vote yay, and there's vote yay and vote nay. Those are Twitch global emotes. Grapes for did it make big claims that shrivel up? I don't think so. Navel gazing, was this only for academics? No, this is kind of like a policy thing. It was a little bit academic-y, but also kind of policy thing. So it's that. Oh yeah, so you thought that was fun. Cool. Ouroboros Deep Ancient Mysteries. Yeah, this is not a Deep Ancient Mystery paper, but that's all right. Was it existential? The Scream? Not really. And no, this was kind of, was it Golden Turd, all style, no substance? Nah, it was not super crazy deep, but it wasn't like it had no, it was all just shiny. They made their arguments. They went through the four things. And the knife did slice and dice. And they're going to get a knife from me. Yeah, exactly, CineSemiX. So we're going to give this, I agree with CineSemiX. We're going to do a vote yay, I think. We're going to do a nog knife. Because this was basically, they set up their argument, they ran their argument, and they sliced and diced everybody else. And was it fun ideas? I don't know if this is gonna get a brain dance from me, but we're gonna get we'll give this a knife and a vote yay for me. Might be with something, an emote acknowledge something that's engaged or worthwhile public philosophy. Yeah, like a negative navel, so it's not just academic. So something that's engaging but on a public level. It's worth considering. Most of the stuff I read is not that. So it would be kind of rare to do with it in Audi. But That'd be funny. Unreal Brian. Infernal thought it was poop. Okay. But yeah. I mean, it was very United States focused. So not always for everybody. Since Americans thought it was deep too. Okay. So this is like the sort of thing. I mean, it is like, if you're interested in political theory, maybe this is like, good political theory for you. Like, what is the federalism? Not poop, but basic as fuck. Fair. I mean, again, you are free to use the emotes as you see fit. The things I have described over here, it's an outline. I'm trying to give like a feel for it because it's very hard to do this stuff. And so it didn't say anything a Wikipedia article on U.S. federalism wouldn't say. Fair. You see, this is one of my deficiencies here. I don't know much about political theory, and so I don't know what is basic federalist talk. So basically, maybe that's what this was really, it just looked good, but it's just making same old claims over and over, and I wouldn't know that. So this is why we have chat, people who know things that I don't know, and that's good. So fair. Cool. What was I saying before that? Yeah, so again, the ratings are just, use them as you see fit. It doesn't have to be perfect. So it's good. CSMX is deep because it grapples with how we can conceive of the hidden relationship between daily life for some people and a structural philosophy of governance. See, this is the thing. People in chat know more about politics than I do. And so they say smart things that I don't know. So that's good, yeah. Unreal says, although I was more positive, Infernal isn't wrong, I was maybe expecting it to go further. Yeah, this was a short article, and basically it wasn't like going super in depth. If you like it, good. If you don't, I understand. Yeah. And it says it's basic political theory, like basic concepts in the area, so I agree, but it's nothing advanced really. Yeah, so that's good, good. So different people have different opinions, and that's fine. It's just, I found it interesting, but again, I don't know I don't know anything, so I find it illuminating because I don't know stuff. But people who know stuff, then they're like, okay, so what? You didn't actually do anything here. But anyway,